Well, hello. Welcome back to another fun-filled episode of my so-called Xennial life. Continuing in with the month of Final Fantasy VII, despite the fact that this is probably going to be released in October, I got a little bit too busy, and I did want to do this video, which is about my review of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, it'll be a little different. Much of the commentary I wrote out, and so it's scripted a little bit. I mean, it's all my thoughts and ideas, and it's my own wording, but you'll notice that my voice is a little bit more mechanical. You know, this one is more like off the breeze type stuff, so that's why sometimes I say and kind of flub a little bit and repeat my words a bit too much. But for a review, I wanted to be more professional. So I hope you enjoy this aspect and enjoy my review of this game. I like to do more reviews of both movies and games. I've done a review before, so hopefully if you like this, I'll do more in the future. Anyway, here is a review for Final Fantasy VII Remake. The Final Fantasy VII Remake was a highly anticipated game released back in 2020 by Square Enix. Much like what Capcom did with the Resident Evil 2 remake, Square Enix completely redid the game from the ground up, and in the process, created a new experience. The city of Midgar is massive and has a lot of little details, and the added crowds create a more lively city that wasn't really there in the original. Many of the old game's locations, such as the Section 7 slums and Tifa Bar, are there, along with several other new places. Also, the increased size of the maps allow for more exploration of Midgar this time around. While this is a great idea, it wasn't overkill as it made the levels needlessly longer. Many of the characters are back, including Cloud, Baron, and Tifa, and look better than ever. The old gang looks great, and they don't have a clunky look like before. I do prefer the original's anime and cartoony style look as that was more appealing to me, but regardless, they look great, and they come off looking like what I would have imagined they would in a big budget overhaul. They also have great voice acting, although Tifa's and Barrett's weren't up to par to the others, but overall is a great addition. The sound effects are also great, and I was very pleased that they used most of the original soundtrack, which is a smart move on Square's behalf. The combat system has been completely overhauled. Gone is a turn-based combat, replaced with a more action-packed system that allows for more control of the character, but unlike before, where you took turns controlling each one, the new system makes you manually switch from one to the other, or simply allow the AI to control the other ones. While it's easy to learn, this makes the game less like a traditional JRPG and more action-oriented, something like God of War. I don't hate the combat system, but it makes the game feel more like an action platformer rather than a role-playing game. The battles are flashier and brighter, and are very cool to watch, but sometimes there's so much action and explosions happening that it can be a little confusing on what's going on. The original game had some customization, such as the materia that allow for upgrades with the spells. However, the remake really expands on it a lot, with the armor, accessories, and materia all having an ability with frequent power upgrades and customizations that can be a little overwhelming. There's just too much of it, and some of the upgrades don't really amount to anything. I would prefer a much simpler system like the one in the original. I mean, I don't mind the additional items, but the amount of customization just really throws me off. Speaking of additions, the remakes add a lot more side quests. Although these allow for the player to get more items and power-ups, it just seemed there were too many of them, and some tend to be very repetitive and boring. One of the huge negatives I have is that the game is very long, with too many new characters and expanded backstories of others. Now, some of the expansions added to the story, such as with the characters of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse. These characters rightfully get more development and backstory, which was lacking in the original, making their deaths not so emotional. However, other characters are just fillers and don't really add much to the story. Speaking of the story, it follows the path of the original, but changes it up by adding the Whisperers. The Whisperers are some type of supernatural spirits that ensure that the course of destiny wasn't altered by correcting any problems that happened. Now, that destiny turned out was the 1997's storyline and outcome. This does add an interesting aspect since it allowed for surprises and twists. One example is the return of Zack. a minor character who was dead before the events of the original game, but was somehow resurrected later in the remake. Now, one change that's a big negative is the introduction of Sephiroth very early in the story. In the original, Sephiroth wasn't physically shown until many hours later into the game, instead being an invisible omnipresent, which made him a very mysterious figure. However, this is lost in the remake since they established his evil and threatening nature too early. Also, the remake itself is incomplete, as it only deals with maybe about 10% of the original game, focusing only when the characters were in the city of Midgar. This is despite the fact that the remake is almost 35 to 40 hours long, which is almost the same length as the entire game of the original. This is the big negative, and the main reason why I give it a lower rating, its length. With the bigger levels, many side quests, and new characters and such, the game is just very long, and it seems to be mostly useless filler that drags out the game rather than serve as a complete experience. This is made worse by the fact that the storyline is incomplete and hardly covers much of the events of the original. While it looks beautiful, has great sound, and has some good gameplay, the story and extras could be shortened, and some of the new gameplay mechanics could have been simplified. Add to the fact that the story is incomplete, I give the game a 3 out of 5. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review, and hopefully I help you decide whether to get the game or not. But in the meantime, wait for the next My So-Called Xennial Life episode. I think you'll like what I have planned. But in the meantime, like, subscribe, and share, and see you all next time.